I missed the last week of hot takes as I was busy traveling, but I'm back and here we go reading what you guys have to say. First hot take of the week is Overwatch is a game for sweaty tryhards, and nothing in the game supports helping you get better. Let me watch replays of people in the rank group above me playing my best hero well and winning so that I can learn how to play incrementally better and be like them. A Silver Moira. Okay, this one has to be bait, but no way. Overwatch is by far one of the more casual games out there. Not a game for sweaty tryhards. In-game replay system would be kind of nice to be able to just spectate a random match in the game client, but unfortunately we don't have that. We do have a decent replay system, and a lot of people do upload their single POV VODs on YouTube and other platforms. That's probably the best bet to go for, but the rest of it feels pretty bait, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. Having a bigger hitbox doesn't make a character immediately easy to fight against and counter. Example, Bastion. It depends on the mitigation abilities and the abilities that the ability kit that the hero has, but I will say having a bigger hitbox does make the character easy to hit. It'd be easy to fight against encounters dependent on the other factors, but easier to hit, there's a no-brainer. There's more hitbox volume, which means there's less room for error, less margin of error. If I'm playing Baptiste, I can actually whiff against a strafing Junker Queen, but a Roadhog, I'm never gonna miss my shot against them. Next hot take. Actually, this is a cold take. Adding a leaderboard was a mistake. There are so many players that hyperfixate on the raw damage and healing numbers or the amount of kills without context. I think you mean scoreboard. Let me keep reading. Some factors that go into winning or losing games go completely ignored because they don't show up in the leaderboard. You mean scoreboard. It also promotes toxicity. It's way too easy for players who don't understand the game to find a scapegoat for a loss. Disagree. I know this is actually not a hot take. This is not a cold take. This is actually still a hot take. I think adding a scoreboard is a good thing, not a mistake. What you just put out there is maybe one of the few downsides, but I think having a scoreboard brings more advantages and some disadvantages. Every new product or system has its pros and cons. I mean, the old system was like, yeah, it would be less toxicity because people wouldn't scapegoat on certain things that don't show up on the leaderboard. But even without that, people were doing it anyways. People would be like, you have gold healing or gold elims, which means somebody else in your team didn't have it. So they play the guessing game, and instead of blaming one person, they start pointing fingers at everybody, being like, somebody on this team is not pulling their weight, or they'd be like, the TPS heroes are not pulling their weight if I'm on support and I have gold damage, blah, 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 blah. There's going to be factors that no matter what will not show up to any sort of stat system, but there's much more advantages that a scoreboard does bring. Ultimate tracking is one. A lot of the best players in the world, especially for first fight tempo, what you want to do is you press the scoreboard, you check how much damage the enemy hero has done, and you can kind of ballpark how close they are to an ultimate. For example, in a Ryan v Ryan matchup, one thing that I always look for is if their Ryan has about closer to 2,000 damage, that's when I know they're pretty close to shatter, or 1,600 damage, excuse me. Also multiplied by the time passed and how much the Ryan was swinging on the other Ryan, because there's less alt charge generated there. A couple of other factors, but it gives you a good ballpark on how well they're doing. Yeah, no, I think scoreboard is definitely not a mistake. It was a good thing. Hot take, the ball rework wasn't really actually a rework, just quality of life changes to distract from the fact that Venture is a new counter to ball. I mean, rework is a pretty loose term used for just like re-gearing and reorienting some parts of the kit. They added a brand new part and a couple of quality of life changes. So I wouldn't call it rework, but like it's significant enough that they added a brand new mechanic to the ability. So it's a slight rework. I think that's true. And I would disagree that Venture is absolutely not a counter to ball by any stretch. You can drill to stop the fireball in some ways, but like balls can play around that, and like you're limited by range. I think ball is much more countered by other heroes who can constantly pressure him from long ranges away. Venture still has to be close to do damage. If you're a good ball, you know how to space. It's definitely not one of the heroes that ball's like, oh my god, I have to worry about Venture. Ball has to worry more about like Bastions or like Sombras and things that can actually disrupt the shit and actually burst the ball down a lot more. Okay, next hot take. Specifically on console, Sombra is ruining metal ranks for supports. On console, it's much more difficult to 90 or 180 degree flick and take that gunfight. Unlike Tracer, you are able to prepare and track for that fight somewhat. I mostly play Zen and it feels terrible because it feels like an unbeatable matchup in a must-swap scenario. And never has Overwatch felt like a true must-swap scenarios, at least for supports. Okay, I have not played console, so this is something I can't personally relate to, and it has 22 likes on this YouTube comment, so I assume this is a problem that a lot of metal rank Zenyatta players specifically are dealing with. I will say that probably doesn't feel like a favorable matchup, because I would say, yes, you can't 90 degree and 180 flick to take the gunfight, but you can still move your left analog stick to strafe as best as you can. But I will say, I don't know how strong the aim assist is, so maybe the Sombra who's actually kind of looking at you and aiming at your center mass will just get everything auto-aimed for the Sombra player, that you will probably get bursted down. So that may be one of the matchups that isn't ideal. But that being said, there are plenty of other supports, even on console, that you don't even have the 180 degree flick, but you can absolutely survive and use some resources to keep yourself alive. Some may be like Lucio, Moira, Kiriko to Suzu a little bit, Brig to boop the Sombra back. Sombra is sort of like a team effort in some cases. You try not to take too many 1v1s in this game as you can, especially because you're on a support role and it's a team game. You know, ideally you put yourself in a spot where you aren't isolated, where you can be one shot completely by a Tracer or a Sombra, and dealing with flankers is part of the game of Overwatch. Some flankers do become a bit more egregious than others and safer. On PC, it's Tracer, who can absolutely 1v1 the Zen, and Sombras, who can actually completely 100 to 0 Zen if unchecked. But it is a team game. You do have to call for help and, you know, work around some swaps. It's kind of like the Rhine player. If there's a bunch of things that can own you, there might be times where you have to swap. If you're playing Zen and you're constantly singled out, no peel from the team, you've called for help, this may be a time that you have to swap. That's why I think heroes like Tracer on PC on DPS is so safe, because you never even need to swap off Tracer in a lot of cases. There may be some certain maps, but the one size fits all are just the more dominant picks, and the more niche heroes will have picks that kind of own them. I guess not that hot, but you're kind of ruining metal ranks for supports and supports as a whole when there's plenty of supports that can deal with Sombra. Anyways, next hot take. If Suzu didn't have the invulnerability and you didn't change anything else, it would still be an S tier ability. The cleanse and heal burst alone are already strong enough. You are almost guaranteed to be cleansing a negative effect anyway. So an instant 100 heal on a negative effect, what the DPS passes back at 20%? It is pretty strong, but without the cleanse, I would not call it an S tier ability. An ability that just raw heals your team, okay. It just seems like basically a friendly Ana nade, but friendly Ana nade has some other effects. And if you just had Ana's nade as just a friendly thing, it just feels like a small healing tool, which isn't anything too crazy. I wouldn't put it as S tier. My hot take for this, if Suzu didn't have the invulnerability where you can cleanse a negative effect, wake them up, blah, 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 from sleeps, it would be like a B tier. It just feels like a normal average healing ability for support, not S tier. Anyways, the next hot take is the auto healing given to tanks and DPS isn't even noticeable. I still remember people acting like the sky was falling. You mean all roles, the global heal passive, right? 5 seconds, yes, I agree. It's not a hot take. It isn't even noticeable because you only really have it kick in like once or twice in an entire game if the conditions are perfect, where you're literally behind a corner, they don't know where you are, and you are low, and you cannot take a lick of damage. Some tanks can do it a little better than others. For example, Wrecking Ball can roll absolutely all the way out and like come back in and actually have a kick in. But some heroes like Orisa are always going to be taking a little bit of chip damage that it'll never kick in. Maybe heroes like Rhine are also okay because you can hold a shield up, hide around a corner, and you can't get hit by like a random Tracer or a bullet to mark that DPS or to stop the global healing passive from kicking in. But yeah, some people were acting like the sky is falling. I agree. And the global healing isn't that noticeable at all. Agreed. Not a hot take for me. Hitting higher ranks is easy as long as you do your placement right. Some GMs who is hard stuck for GM for a month can easily hit champion in under 25 games. If you do your placement right and you went 10-0, even a 10-0, you already have to have really high previous GM1 MMR from pre-season 9. And if you're already in season 9, hitting champion right now is very hard. So the people that are camping champion are accounts that don't show up in the top 500 leaderboard because they don't play the 50 minimum required games. But playing 50 games and maintaining champion is genuinely very hard and is not easy, even if you crush your placements. But the placements are only a one-time thing in season 9. If you've noticed in season 10, as we've been playing, you don't have to do placements anymore. Whatever you finished last season is exactly where you start this season. No placements required. So the reset that is happening annually, as they first said, they've been teasing semi-annually, so every 6 months. So maybe like after this season, the next season, they may do another reset, who knows. On those resets, yes, they did already emphasize that placements are important. And if your MMR is already pretty high, I would assume anybody who's already like mid to high GM who goes 10-0 in placements will probably get champion MMR, because 10-0 is equivalent of gaining hopefully 15, we'll say like 18% on average. 10-0 is 180%, that's 2 whole ranks. If you're GM through 2 or 3 and you go 10-0 in placements, you should place champion, and I think that's fine. But to show up on the leaderboard, For top 500, you do need 50 wins on top of not just placements, and that is genuinely hard. Anybody who's got 50 games and is champion, hats off to you. Okay, hot take. Next one. A lot of upvotes, 59. You cannot carry every match no matter how good you are at the game. That's true. Sometimes your teammates are just not evenly matched against the other team. People always say that if you were just better, you would have won, and that is just not true. I'm not saying that you cannot climb no matter how good you are. That it's just that it's impossible to carry every game. I agree with this. I say that out loud on stream, like if I was just better, I would have won. But I kind of say that in jest, sometimes a bit sarcastically, where like I feel like I performed way above what is required of me in a lot of cases, and you absolutely cannot win. I mean, you only account for 20% of the outcome of your team. Right? There's 5 players. If you push really hard, you double your output and you're like popping off for 40%, and that's definitely the definition of a hard carry. But sometimes the conditions aren't right. They're not playing. One of your teammates just went out drinking and came back, decided to queue rank by accident. There will be conditions out of your control where it's literally impossible for you to have a perfect 0 clean, squeaky clean 100-0 record. It's just not possible because there's too many other factors to consider. So I agree with this. There's nothing here to disagree with. The people, if you're just better, you would have won. I feel like maybe some people genuinely believe that, and that's where this, you have to bring this point up. But I do feel like most people who say, if I'm just better, I'll win, that's kind of, in jest. And there has to be another word for this besides in jest. They say it to kind of like hype themselves up, or like to be a bit more humble and to kind of like play it off a little bit. I don't think it's as serious in that way. Tank is the hardest role to climb on if you're not already massively above your rank. Lower rank players have this always counter, always shoot the tank mindset that makes it impossible for you as a tank player to have as big an impact as you would like. Meanwhile, if you can't, as a better player, get anything done, your DPS is not as good, will get even less done. As a diamond tank playing in mid-gold lobbies on a newer account, I'm still winning 70 to 80% of my games, but somehow it feels like I don't have as much impact as in, say, high plat. Well, at the end of the day, I will say with this hot take and the take about tanks is that it's hard to feel like you're having impact, but if you are generating enough threat, if they're trying to focus on you as a tank where it feels like you can't get anything done, you are technically drawing cooldowns, aggro, and aggression from the enemy team. You are creating space in that way because you're pulling attention. Sometimes, yes, your teams will not be able to capitalize, but in a lot of cases, if you as a tank player recognize that's happening, you're the dummy. You sometimes just have to sit there and exist and just take it for your team. You know that scene from Spider-Man where he's like fucking holding the trains from like colliding with each other, just taking it all and just pulling his body apart? That's you. Doesn't feel great for Spider-Man or you, I suppose, but you will win across a long amount of games, hundreds and hundreds of games. You, on average, will win more than you lose because you are simply that threatening and pulling that much aggro, and you understand that, and you do your best to survive all your mitigation cooldowns, using your cover as best as you can. You will win more than you lose if that's true. I wouldn't say it's the hardest role to climb on. It's the hardest role to feel good on. Is probably a better way to put it, to feel like you're having an impact, but you are having an impact, it's just hard to feel it. That's a completely different problem to solve for Overwatch and a lot of games to make the tank role more ideal. I've said this in every single video that mentions stuff about tanks, is that tanks are the least feel-good roles in games beyond Overwatch 2. We throw in tanks from, other games and MMOs. They're just the meat shield, and it takes a certain person and personality to understand that's the role and like feel good about that. It doesn't feel good to just soak everything in. Maybe sometimes where you soak everything in and feel super powerful because you didn't die, like rah, but then that's unfun for everybody else. And then if that were the case in Overwatch where the tank is unkillable and you rah 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 rah, then we have other issues on hand because then the tank becomes too powerful and becomes way too OP for the rest of the player base, and maybe the tank doesn't even feel good about doing that. But that's probably why Orisa was so good, because that's how Orisa felt in a lot of cases. You do need resources, but like you feel like you could do everything. Ooh, this is an interesting hot take here. Overwatch players don't realize how good they have it. As someone who plays a lot of free-to-play FPS games, Overwatch is probably the best right now. I've almost 3,000 hours of Apex and decided to try my hand at Overwatch 2 when it came out, and honestly, it's very refreshing. Game has the best skins out there, a super easy battle pass to complete. It's easy to sit and play for long periods of time or in short bursts. The devs are way more transparent than I've ever seen, other than with PvE, but not that I personally cared for it. After trying Overwatch, I'm actually here to stay, but it seems like all the community complains about are the things that I find to be the upside of Overwatch. For example, skins, battle pass too hard, transparency of devs. Every time I go play other games, I find myself wishing those in power ran things like Overwatch. It's actually interesting to hear a take from somebody who's new to the scene and put in a lot of hours in a different community in a different game. I've always, said that the people who complain the loudest on social media, where they mention stuff about transparency of devs, certain things. Those are the people who have been in the community since the beginning, 2016. Times have probably changed a little bit. And the people who complain the most are those who don't play anymore. And they're just online on forums to complain. There's a saying out there that if you're going, there's more likelihood of you going online to complain than to go online and type something nice about them. The people who are enjoying it are just like logging in on a Friday night, casually enjoying the game for its short or long bursts with some friends and moving on with their day. And I will say, when you live and play in a game in a community long enough, you will find cracks at the seams no matter what. League of Legends players who have constantly been playing and have a huge player base are the most miserable people outside looking in. Outside looking in, people can say with Overwatch players, they look so miserable because they complain about everything. And then outside looking in, for me, when I look at Apex, sounds like they're always complaining about shit. And then me outside looking into Valorant, everyone's just complaining about all these smokes, all these new heroes have so many abilities. They dumb down smokes. There's a timer now. There's a new animation. Wah, 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 wah. So there will always be complainers. I always say, go out there and enjoy what you enjoy and tune out a lot as much as you can. And if you like the game, don't let anybody convince you not to like the game. And I'm glad you've tried Overwatch and enjoy it. If you stick around long enough, you will have some things to rightfully criticize and complain about. And Overwatch will do some things better than Apex. And I will say probably Apex does do some other things better than Overwatch. Maybe you haven't found that yet because you haven't put enough hours in this community compared to the other community. It's always this, or this is better than that, that is better than this. You can do that, but I like to live my life enjoying the things I enjoy, and I'm happy you're enjoying it. And I will also agree that I do feel like a lot of Overwatch players don't realize how good we have it. Like, remove some of the stuff, the clutter that people say, and the stuff on front, and this game is good at its core. It runs well, it's optimized. And I'm not just saying this as I'm an Overwatch shill, and it's because you're an Overwatch creator, of course you're biased. If anything, the people who play the game the longest are the most critical. I've criticized other parts of the game, but I do think at its core the game is fun. I would definitely not be playing it if it didn't pay the bills, but also wasn't fun enough for me to play a certain amount of hours every season. I genuinely still really enjoy this game. Next hot take: limiting or effects and or abilities to singular heroes sucks. This goes against what the devs wanted about counterpicking, where only one specific character can use Suzu, or Anti, the Jungle Queen doesn't count, or hack, or forcing players to pick that specific character for that specific ability. Why, instead of adding characters with new abilities, they just add another character that does one ability differently, similar to how Valorant does smokes with its controllers? For example, Omen can place a smoke down in a sphere shape or in a large area, whereas Viper throws on a long wall. Different implementations of the same ability. I actually sort of agree with this, but I will say there is some overlap in some abilities, but I think Overwatch is trying its best to be as unique as they can before things eventually become really homogenous. When you eventually do add a lot of heroes in the game, there will be some overlap, and that will probably solve the thing you're talking about. Jungle Queen does Anti, that was the second iteration of Anti-Nade. Hack is unique to Sombra. But technically, yeah, I see where you're going with it. And I do think eventually Overwatch will fall into that place where there will be overlap. And I think overlap is okay. And it's there's only so many things you can design without some sort of overlap in relation to other heroes. And you say it sucks, but I actually think it makes it unique for now. And if you ride the waves and the growth of the game over the years, we will head in that direction. I think it's inevitable, and I'm just enjoying the ride for now. I know it's singular hero sucks for you, but for me, I disagree. I think it's kind of cool how there's a very unique niche or role that person can do. Last one, 187 likes, wow. Ashe, as a long-range hit scan hero, is much more balanced and healthy for the game than Widow will ever be. Had Ashe been released earlier, Widow wouldn't exist. I don't know about Widow not existing. I think in an FPS game, someone with some sort of sniper capabilities is always going to be on the horizon no matter what. I can't think of a single first-person shooter that doesn't have some sort of long-range sniping capabilities. So disagree on the last part with Widow not existing, but I agree that Ashe is a very fun, pretty balanced, healthy hit scan hero for the game. Then Widow will ever be? Yeah, I think like Ashe has distinct weaknesses. Sometimes Widow can just play ridiculously out of range, all that stuff. So agreed, minus the last part. I think eventually they'll go down that pipeline where somebody will add a long-range sniper, but not a bad take. And that's it for this week. Leave yours in the comments, but keep it short like this. I like hot takes like this where I don't have to read too much into it, but can give a nice response. All right, see you next week. Peace.